ReliaQuest mental performance coaches Dr. Nicole Detling and Derin McMains interview top performers across multiple industries to unpack the strategies and the mindset they use to get the job done. Welcome to No Show Dogs, powered by ReliaQuest. Hey, welcome back to the No Show Dogs podcast, powered by ReliaQuest. My name is Derin McMains, and I'm joined alongside my co-host, Dr. Nicole Detling. Doc, what's up?
Hey, man, having a great day today. How about you?
Oh, so good, and I'm so excited for this guest, but I got to be honest right at the top. It is very difficult for me to welcome someone on our show that is currently employed by the Los Angeles Dodgers. So let me say this because I've spent 24 years now in professional baseball, 17 with the San Francisco Giants. My 5th year is coming up with the Diamondbacks. So 22 of those 24 years have been in the National League West. And when you first sign a contract, I don't know if they still do this, but when you first sign a contract with the San Francisco Giants in 2001, they said, "Welcome to the San Francisco Giants. You now hate the Dodgers." And I didn't, and I was like,
the clause in the contract, right? You're signing your name.
and my scout, we're going to talk to a scout today, but my scout was Todd Thomas, Tiny. And that was the first thing he told me after I signed the contract. I'm a kid growing up in Arkansas. So I'm like, got it. Hate him. I don't know. And so anyway, I don't know if we still do that, but I mentioned 22 of those years in the National League West. 2 years I was with the Seattle Mariners, and that's where we met our guest today, Tom Allison. I'm going to give you his full bio here in just a minute. But Tom, welcome to the show. We're so excited that you're here.
Well, thank you. And again, one thing in hating the world champion Los Angeles Dodgers, it makes it, that much easier for me to be here and look at that San Francisco Giants hat in the background. But, one of the things, and again, this game has given me so many tremendous titles, world champion, even World Series competitor. This was my first year. 35 years later. So this was cool and very exciting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
It's incredible, right? By the way, I did put that Giants hat in this. For those of you watching on YouTube, there's a Giants hat. Specifically, it's Bruce Bochy's. I'm going to put it on real quick. So if you're watching on YouTube, everybody knows how big a head he has, right? This is 8 and an 8. Like, it's just like, what is this?
Well, it's actually a good bird bath if you just turn it upside down.
I love it. I love it, man.
Sorry, Boach.
Love the banter. Yes.
All right, man. Well, hey, let's. I just want to catch everybody up to speed on who we are, and then on who you are, and then we're going to jump into all things evaluating talent, because for 35 plus years you've been in professional baseball, doing this role, evaluating talent on all different levels, from leading organizations to front lines out in small high school fields around America, probably internationally as well. So Tom spent over 35 years in professional baseball. He's worked in scouting in several different Major League Baseball organizations, having made his mark with the New York Mets, the Milwaukee Brewers, the Arizona Diamondbacks, Boston Red Sox, Seattle Mariners, and obviously now the Los Angeles Dodgers. Pretty cool fun fact about Tom is he was drafted in the 48th round by the Mets back in 1990, man. So 48th round draft pick, parlayed that into a 35 plus year career and still going, world champion, man. A little bit more background on him. Graduate of Chapman University with a degree in legal studies. So you didn't study quote unquote scouting in college.
That's right.
And he grew up in Willow, Alaska, and showed grit and determination. I love this. Check this out. Hold on to your hats right here. Showed grit and determination beyond the baseball diamond, because he finished the challenging junior Iditarod sled dog race, not once, but twice, by the way.
Wait, what? Oh, wait, hold on a second. The Iditarod, the junior Iditarod, twice. Finished it.
Twice, not usually. If a scout was going to get a hold of me and try and figure out, okay, yeah, he's a 2-sport athlete, I wanted to be that first 2-sport athlete. So sled dogs and baseball.
Oh my gosh. Okay. We got to talk about this for just a minute before we get into all the recruiting stuff and scouting, which is so fascinating, but there's no way we can brush by that and not talk about it. Can you tell us one thing about the Iditarod sled dog race that most people would be surprised to know?
Wow. Good question. It was something, near and dear to my father. And of course, that's where I got my passion from it. And my father, we always, embarked on getting sled dogs and really had them as entertainment, and loved going out and spending time in the winters on a sled. But one of the coolest things and really impactful in my life was my dad and another gentleman by the name of Ron Aldridge actually ran the full Iditarod sled dog race, 1979, and then continued from Nome, Alaska to Barrow, Alaska, going along the Bering Sea. And they did this in support of subsistence whaling for the Native American Eskimos at the time. So it provided just an incredible 77-day tour of small town Alaska, certain cultures that just provided me lifetime experience.
That is fascinating. I love this. Would you say that that has helped shape who you've become as an adult and the job that you have now and how you go about your work?
I think it really reiterated something that through your podcast I've always seen, is that our words are really good, actions are awesome. And my dad was a tremendous motivator, always positive, and then to be able to watch him go out and not only take on one of his lifelong dreams but achieve it. That really, when I look at it now, resonated with myself of chasing what really is important.
That's
Wow.
incredible. Okay, sorry for interrupting the bio there,
No,
DMAC, but there's no way we can't talk about that for a moment.
I know.
Yes.
Yeah, when Tom sent that over, Tom and I, we worked together for 2 years, and I told him, I was like, how do I never know that? But obviously you don't lead with that, and that's why. And it's not a question that generally comes up like, hey, tell me about your childhood. Were you ever in an Iditarod?
That's
So
right.
it's good. But let's get to evaluating talent, right? That's where we're headed today. So excited about this. And we're just going to start right at the top with how you think about character versus talent when you're out observing players, right? And I went and looked, and college football, we're in the middle of the college football playoff right now. By the time we air this episode, the national championship will have just happened, so we don't know how that's going to turn out. But one thing that I think we all
I
can
do.
agree on.
I do.
Oh, here
But
we go. Yeah,
Let's go Ducks.
my team's going to win the whole thing. But yeah. All right.
But one thing that I noticed is that if you look at the top 4 programs, when I say top 4 programs, meaning have the most wins over the last 10 years, it's Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Georgia. When you look at the top 5 recruiting classes over the last 10 years, Alabama has showed up in that 10 times every year. Ohio State has joined that list 8 times. Georgia has joined that list 7 times. Now, Clemson's only been on there once, which I think kind of gives a testament to kind of maybe what Dabo's doing over there. But anyway, I say all that, and that talent really matters, right? But let's just get that out on you got to have talent to get on the dance floor. So let's just get that out there. But you're the expert, Tom. How do you think about it when you're in the field and you're watching players and you're having interviews and you're doing the whole thing? How do you weigh, balance, look at character versus talent?
I think one of the things when we're prospecting, and that's what I think about it, we're prospecting and mining for talent. And then usually what stands out when we watch them on their arena of environment, where they play, usually their bodies, their movement patterns, and then their skill sets start to take shape. And you see the ones that separate themselves. And that's how I think about talent and what they can do in the arena of competition versus then what their character is. And, that entails so much. And I know throughout my career, I've had to, learn to mature into blending both and balancing both. And I go back to one of my big influencers in the game, Paul Snyder, longtime scout, director for the Atlanta Braves, but he'd always say, Tom, there is a certain point that a player is going to maximize and become the best version of themselves. Sometimes you just hope it's going to be with you. So, in other words, the maturity of character can really then affect some of that talent that we see. And we all have that person that we played in the neighborhood with. Wow, they're just so much better in talent level than we are. But yet we might find some character flaws with them. And how does that balance? And then when you're out doing an evaluation of bringing them into now an organization, how is that going to fit? Because we do know, and I think you just said it very well, comparing their wins versus their talent as it was recruited in, there is a big delta between those two, between talent and becoming a championship team.
How do you suss out character when you're sitting in the stands
Hmm.
and you're just watching from afar? And there's an and to this, and maybe some things that you look for in an interview when you're meeting with potentially the parents or the agent or the athlete individually. Like, how do you like? What are some things you show up, you listen for, that you see that you're like, oh, I think this person has the character that we want, that will maximize their potential sooner rather than later.
Yeah, outstanding point. Because one of the things that you don't get to do the more you move up, say, in rank, is you might not have as much time with the player. So, in other words, you're not around them multiple events, and that can be other sports they play, that can be their interaction with teachers, other students, other players in the during the summer showcases. So you rely on other people to piece that together. So what you train yourself to do is talk about, and I always, and throughout this time that we'll have together, I will talk about being such a better listener and asking more questions than making statements. So I will want to know more about the environment that the player has been in. Who have been the influencers? I think one, Derin McMains, used to talk about that. Who influenced them that first 16, 17 years of their life, right? Mom and dad, sisters and brothers. And what did they see, and how did they take that to their playing environment with them? So those were some subtle things that I think are early questions. And then again, trying to watch them in their game day preparation, during their game day ABs or on the mound. And one of the things that you really hope for, and sometimes again to that same reliance on the area scout or other scouts in your organization that are there with you, is how do they handle failure? Because so many times we do go and see these players and we see them dominate their level of competition. And that's something, especially at the high school level, when we are in a smaller town, they're certainly the big fish in a much smaller pond.
It's so good. I love what you brought up, the idea around watch how they prepare and watch how they handle failure. Right. I do think those two things are key when you're sussing out character, because generally when the lights are on, you're going to put your best foot forward, whatever that best foot is.
Hmm.
Right. But it's the preparation before you get into the arena that starts to paint a clearer picture, because that kind of goes like that. To me, that points to a couple things. One, standards. Like I have personal standards I'm gonna make sure I prepare to.
Hmm.
Two, I'm controlling what I can control. I can control my preparation. Not sure how this is going to go. Three, and I also think it speaks to almost like pride and passion, like pride for my craft, passion for the game. I'm going to show up. And so that's how I think about when you say preparation, how you handle failure. But I know what you're doing is extremely difficult. You've been wrong more than you've been right. And that is not a knock on you. It's just the industry, right? That is the industry. It is so difficult to predict, hey, this 16-year-old who's 17-year-old in middle of nowhere, Texas, is going to be able to be a world champion in Los Angeles when he's 26 years old, right? I mean, that is like,
Yeah.
it's almost an impossible job. So I know you've been burned in the past. I know you've got it right in the past. You've done both. And what are some things you've learned along the way, and how do you manage getting it right? And what are some things you've seen where you're like, oh, wow, I learned that here, and now I'm going to make sure I do that going forward?
Yeah, you said it. So 23,370 major leaguers of all time. So let that sink in for yourselves and certainly listeners, that that doesn't even fill up half of most football arenas. That
Wow.
technically, it is easier to go into space than it is to become a Major League Baseball player. So right there puts it in some perspective. And also yourself included, myself, who we played throughout the minor leagues, we understand all of the talent that is around us, and then how hard it is to just get one day in the big leagues. And that number of 23,000 plus doesn't even represent that now how many had 5 years of a career. And then it's less than 7 to 8% actually get to 10 years of a major league career. So it's very difficult. And our game, as you both well know, is full of failure. And how are then we going to be able to pick out not only the physical attributes, but the mental attributes of that young person who has not fully matured in either to then ascend to the highest level? And I think one of the things, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, is that early on, man, you are driven to just get it right. I need to get this player right. And over the years now, I've really learned in going back and learning from all of those less than stellar outcomes that those were opportunities to learn. Did I do it right? And so that's one of the things that I've really tried to push forward is at the time of selection, this was the reason why. And that's become much more in my mature approach to what players are, because early on, you're driven by, man, this player has all of these qualities. And I was coming straight off of the field with the New York Mets to a coaching role with the New York Mets. You believed so much in the orange and blue and what they could do when they get to New York that you were still blinded by some of the failures that were going to naturally happen.
So what about the other side? Have you made errors on the other side where you thought maybe they didn't have the talent and they proved you wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. Had coffee yesterday with one of my favorites, and I asked him if I could use his name, so it was great. But Jake Elmore, Jake was a player that I didn't see till he got to Arizona State from Alabama. He played in a junior college, and bottom line, he was a very low draft pick. He hit 111. I actually said, Jake, you were a 111 slash line, 286 on base, 111 slug. So that's a just incredible 397 OPS. It was a terrible performance year. But because our scout Rodney Davis believed in the athletic mover, he believed in the makeup, he believed in past performance, really continued to sell Jake in that manner of, hey, still somebody worth taking an opportunity on. And sure enough, touched the big leagues, played parts of 6th season, and is now still in the game. So he's one that, personally, I love talking about. Ryan Howard was a tremendous learning process for me. Ryan was a player at some small school in Missouri. I'm not sure if they,
Southwest Missouri State.
Yeah. Here we go.
Southwest
Yeah,
Missouri State. I got you.
I'd let you go ahead and represent. But the thing that he did was you get a blink, and the day I saw him becomes this. That's what you wrap your arms around. And his performance was 0 for 4, 4 strikeouts, 12 swing and miss. And that's what sticks out in your mind. And that becomes the bias. And you don't have, you stay with blinders to what he does from that day forward or who he was or why. And I think that's probably the other thing is understanding the environment of observation mixed with what you do see and how you balance that in the overall picture of the player. So obviously Ryan Howard, you dig later, this guy was really just didn't handle the moment of the draft very well, but yet still had pretty decent success. And he's from a support system that everybody was successful. So he went on then to become a MVP, and my personal report did not reflect that.
Okay, I would love to just dig into that for just a moment, because I think that's really applicable even in the business world, where we form an opinion, an impression of someone that may not always be accurate or fair, but it's based on this one moment in time, and that's all the information we have. And I love how you just said that, where we put these blinders on. And there has to be some level of self-awareness in recognizing that you've put these blinders on, and it may not necessarily be accurate or fair. It's just accurate of that moment in time. And so I'd love to hear if you have any advice for people who maybe struggle with that a little bit, or recognize that's something that they do and they want to work on that in some way to improve what they're doing in their worlds.
Yeah, I love that. And, it's probably not the steps they want to take to get there, but I do believe that being fired and then self auditing my own self really, really hit home in the world of the why. And I think that when you were able to then have some mind space to go back in and have some truth tellers around you as well, that, okay, no, that's not exactly, you're misremembering why you got to that decision. But being able to go through those steps and kind of deconstruct the decision making process is something that really helped me grow. And again, sometimes at the expense of, changing organizations and all of those things. But I do think that that's something that over the course of time, I've really grown to understand more, is how much that played a part in springboarding to the next decision. So we get caught up in the outcomes so much, right? That's how we judge ourselves compared to the how we did it. And our overall biases are so strong and sometimes very good to lean on. But to know where they are in the scales of justice in our decision making process, I think does need self auditing.
No Show Dogs is brought to you by ReliaQuest, a global leader in cybersecurity. ReliaQuest helps enterprise cybersecurity teams increase visibility, reduce complexity, and manage risk through its security operations platform, Gray Matter. Powered by decades of experience and streamlined by AI and automation, ReliaQuest exists to make security possible. Learn more at ReliaQuest.com. That's good, TA. That's awesome, man. I love what you said earlier around the difference between getting it right versus doing it right, and just how challenging it is. And I mean, shoot, this is a business too. What Doc and I, we've learned in hiring, it is so challenging to get it right. And so that means, since it's so hard to get it right, you better be really good at doing it right and feel good about kind of how you approach it and what are all the things you're sussing out. I want to talk about you as a leader of a global team right now, right? As head of scouting, when you're with the Mariners, and I think about scouts all over the country, all over the world, right? You're scouting players in Asia and in the Dominican Republic and down in South America. And I'm just curious, like, how have you maintained alignment on, like, hey, this is our culture. These are the type of players we're trying to bring into our organization. So how have you maintained alignment with your global staff, like some strategies? And the second piece to that is, can you train those scouts that are out looking for these players? Like, can you train them how to spot intangibles? Like, those are the hardest things, right? We talked about it earlier about character versus talent. Like, how have you done that in the past? What are some things that you've done to help maintain alignment as well with leading a global team?
I think one of the things early on is, again, just recognizing who you are as an individual. And I always, on all of the teams, seem to always win more of the MIP award, most inspirational player, than the most valuable player. So, in other words, be a servant and humble leader. And I had a core piece of paper handed to me when I had the opportunity to lead a staff, and it read, interest breeds loyalty. Loyalty breeds energy. Energy breeds effort. Effort breeds results. And it all starts by showing interest. So as we go into the staff that we have, the staff that we're going to build, one of the things that I have felt that has helped shape who we are is understand all of the stakeholders that are involved within it. And that's a group of scouts, as you mentioned, that can be very remote and live in many different places throughout the United States and throughout the world. And then how to keep them, and be connected in a way where they're all, and as I mentioned to them all the time, I want you to be you, aligned with us. So aligned with us in how we have to do some things. And a lot of that takes the training. It takes investment in who they are. and letting them like evolve within their own decision making process to put the we ahead of the I. And that's hard. It is very hard, and we don't get together enough. That's one of the things as I see scouting staffs evolve. I always love to hear more about the times they get to spend together, because it's not on a daily basis at the water cooler in an office. It's connected maybe through a social media platform or Slack or phone calls or calls like this. And how do you keep them engaged and on task with it? So one of the other things that I thought was really important, and I thought was something that we could do, was cross-pollinate, so to speak. And in other words, putting people, go spend time here in an unfamiliar area of the country and travel and learn from your teammate. And I think that was something that really helped us grow in many places that I've been. And I see it now here, even within the Los Angeles Dodgers, is that we do have an opportunity to see what the employee, our teammate next to us, is doing. And once we're invested in that, that really helps that culture continue to grow.
It's such an interesting idea around cross-pollinating, just so I better understand, our listeners understand. So scouts have an area, right? So let's say there's one scout that's covering Southern California. Are you suggesting that, hey, you're going to have this person maybe go spend some time with the scout that's in the Northeast, even though they're completely out of area, just to get to know that teammate better? Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, correctly. And even cross-pollinate within some of your scouts to go spend time with your player development, which is your minor league coaches, or spend time at the big league level with your coaches. Spend time in the office with some of our staff that is in the quant, right? So quantitative analysis, or spend time with medical, whoever it might be, understanding that we all wear the same Dodgers across the front of our chest, but we have multiple backgrounds. We have diversity in thought. We have diversity in how we view things through our mining and prospecting lens, and you get to know their why a little bit more. And I think that's something that just energizes so much.
How do you, we have a new segment coming up here shortly, by the way, so for our listeners, but I got to ask a follow-up on this one. How have you got across the importance of that idea with scouts that are trained to be on the road 300 days a
Mhm.
year or however many days it is? It's like, hey, if I'm in LA with our analytics team, then I'm not out scouting. Like, how do you help people realize in the
Mhm.
teams you get to lead, like, hey, this is an important thing? How do you do that?
Doc, you're going to love this one. How do we get them off of the hamster wheel? That's what you're going to. Because we're always, I got to get to the next game. I got to get my report in. I got to drive. I got to go. I got to do this, because there's only a certain amount of time. And we're always in this constant wheel of what should I be doing next? And it's really a false scent. And it's a kind of a fear that drives those, and guilty. I just want you to know, guilty right here. But to have somebody, your mentors, those that have more of a 10,000-foot view, that can stop and then are going to dedicate time, they're going to dedicate resources into your growth as an evaluator, so that you realize maybe it isn't about just seeing the next player, but being much more equipped with all of the things that you would learn from your teammates to then make a better decision on the impactful report that you're going to write on that player.
Can we talk about the draft room real quick?
Sure.
So, and this is a question that one of our teammates asked as well, but you're in there trying to manage what gets to be pretty um, emotional decisions. This scout has spent a few years following this player. This scout has spent a few years following this player, and this is a big decision you got to make. Like, how do you manage the conflict between the two scouts on this is the decision we're making from a leadership standpoint? How do you manage that?
Well, I think the first thing goes back to that hiring process that we talked about. And as we're bringing in teammates, as we're training teammates, and we're investing in our culture, and we're investing in how we like to select players that are coming in, they're aligned with our player development, they're aligned with our major league staff and medical, so that they understand it isn't always about my guy. It's about our guy that we want to select. And this goes to your intangible question and also the follow up in like what young scouts, myself included, we get very umbrous in our reports about our words about a player because we want to get the player and we want them for maybe the wrong reasons. We want them for me. And so one of the things that you have to do is develop that culture outside of the draft room. And then as we walk into the draft room, everybody has the empowerment of their words, their empowerment of their reports, the psychological safety to be able to say, I heard a little bit more about my player. I've got more information. I now feel like this player is better than that player. So Roland Heeman, one of the great Hall of Famers of our game, said, if a scout won't change their mind, then you can't trust them. And I think that's a really cool environment as we walk into the draft room. Everybody check your ego at the door. Understand there were a few rules that I had, and that was to the point about intangibles. Nobody can say this guy's a good, good kid. This player is a good athlete. Those are the most nondescript words about somebody that lead me to listen. Give me more depth about the why. And so now when you're in that draft room and you're balancing much more information, and I think that was some of the aha moments I had as a young scout, was coming in and seeing way more information about the player that I feel like I know as an area scout tremendously. There is the medical lens, there is the lens that comes from your performance movers, and there is then the lens of all of your other teammates. So how do you grow that trust? You grow that trust by allowing other people to see reports and how they're written. How did Scout, my teammate in this arena, see him, and what was the why? You communicate verbally, you hear them in the draft room, and you can see their reports. And I think that's what allows you to grow. And then when you're in that draft room, you get to the players that are best for the organization, not just best for a certain area, a certain part of the country. And that's what people learn over the years. And that does take time. But again, it all starts with the hiring process, the investment in the training process of how and why we do things outside of it going into the draft.
I just want to highlight one thing before we get to our new segment, because you've said this multiple times and I really want to make sure our listeners hear it, but the importance of the why and going deeper into the reason that you came to a decision versus just giving that generic, hey, great kid, good athlete, good employee, looks good on paper, interviewed well. Okay. What does that actually mean and why? And I think that we could potentially make better decisions in the process. Even if it takes a little bit longer to make the decision, we have a better chance of making the correct decision if we really evaluate and go deeper into that why. So thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think too, just in a very data-driven world, that you can take those comments, you can put them in a metric and understand at certain points that you can track. We say all the times, do your words equal your grades? Do your grades equal your roles? And then we will follow the outcomes as they move along. So to your point, having them go depth and using their Rolodex of situations to talk about their makeup or to reference other players or other times that they've seen this type of ability, all of those things help give them credence to what they're talking about when they give you the why. So it's no longer, sitting in a draft room, well, he can hit because I said he can hit. Right. Okay, you have a chair that you've had great successes with, but we have so much more information and data about the player that gives us better questions to ask. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what gets to the better part of what the why is.
Yeah, that's so good. So good, TA. Well, we mentioned this a few times. We kind of been setting this up that we do have a new segment that we're going to introduce for 2025. And you are going to be the first person that gets to jump into this. And so what this new segment is, we're calling it Questions from the Arena. And what we've done is we've asked, we have over 1,200 teammates in 4 different countries, unbelievably smart, world-class people that now we're like, hey, like they're going to have great questions too. They're listening to this podcast and they're like, we wish you would have asked this, right? So we're like, oh yeah, that's a good question. So now ahead of time, we're just like, hey, for this one in particular, Tom Allison's coming on. This is Tom's background. We're talking about evaluating talent. Submit questions. Now, like anyone, I can tell you in any role, when you implement a new idea, there are always unintended consequences. I wasn't ready for the emails and all the questions that I've now added. Doc shaking her head. She had to do it too. We're going through all the questions like we just added work. Wow. So, but from this, dynamite questions, right? And so for the next few minutes, we just want to fire off 3 or 4 more like interview style questions. I know you're going to give so much good stuff here that we're going to want to deep dive on it, but this is more interview style. And so with that being said, we're just going to kick off here. Brittany sent this one in and you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'll allow you to be more specific here. Brittany asked, what distinguishes great players from elite ones, right? We'll call them all-stars, Hall of Famers. And then how do you recognize those differences in the scouting process?
Yes. Brittany, first and foremost, thank you. Great question. One of the things now that I've really started asking is, what metric is this player chasing? Do I want to be a show dog and just show how good I am as a draftee? Am I trying to be better than the guy next to me and just, show the amount of talent I have in my very small pond? If I could ask them 2 questions, would you rather be an MVP of a World Series winning team or a Hall of Famer? You can only pick one. What would that be? Be really interesting to see and what the difference of those major leaguers compared to those Hall of Famers. And over the years, I think one of the things that stand out is the players that play for the love of the game in every situation. They play like this is their first day. They have great routines. They have great discipline. That's the difference between the average major league player and the elite major league player, is their routines and discipline take them to that next level. Obviously, talent is part of that, but that discipline and routine is tremendous.
That is so good. That is so good. Yes, thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right, I'll give you the next one. So we have one from Michael. He wants to know, what is the most important thing you look for when getting your first impression of a player, both in watching them from a distance and then when you talk to them for the first time?
Yeah, great question, Michael. Again, small town America, they're on the road or they're at home. How do they walk out of the clubhouse? How do they walk off the bus? How do they carry themselves? Are they disheveled? Are they together? Are they mixing and matching with their teammates? Then how do they walk and interact as they go through that prep time? Because the things that stand out early are those. It's a physical appearance. It's the way they carry themselves. It's the way they interact with themselves. Mom and dad are there. It says hello. I just talked to Clayton Kershaw about this a few days ago. The first time I saw Clayton, his mom is overjoyed. She's taking pictures of him down in the bullpen. Here's all of our scouts. And he's like, Mom, I'm an 18-year-old. Like, can you just, but it was with respect. How do they interact with adults? How do they interact with their coach? All of those first impression things matter. And I tell players that all the time when I get the opportunity to talk to them. But from Michael's question, that's one of the things that now you see those first things that you identify. And so much is the physicalness of what the player is, how their body moves, what could the upside be? And those are the things that start clicking through your mind.
Great, man. That's great. This next one's from Ryan. Really good. And he was referencing like Kenley Jansen in this one, who was drafted as a catcher. For those people that aren't aware, he was drafted as a catcher, was in the minor leagues for a few years as a catcher. Now he's one of the best closers of all time as a relief pitcher, right? And so his question's around when scouting players, how do you evaluate skills and talents beyond just their current position? But more specifically, let's talk about corporate, right? So, well, like, what insights can you offer leaders in the corporate world to assess talent based on potential and needs of the team rather than the current role they're doing, right? Like, what stands out
Yeah.
about the players you've scouted that when they're asked to change roles, they do it and they do it well?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one
Yeah,
that
I know.
certainly happens in all walks of life, right? And I think one of this goes again back to that interview process of, do I want an expert or a generalist? Do I want somebody that's full of energy and multi skills? And it's something that we feel like those are things that we can bring in to train. And I think that is, you know, super important as we look at players and we understand like the profile might not fit in this certain box, but as we've evaluated them and we've broke them down, in other words, we've said they can't do this, they don't do this, and all of these things, we forget that we got to put them back together, and these are the skills that they do have. So yes, Kinley didn't have a great bat, but boy, did he have a tremendous arm. He had physical size. Would he fit in this role? And then again, getting to know the person, their love of the game, the mentality, all of those things, then that fits. So I think it's one thing if I said that I would just remind myself that when I've broken the player down, I realize how hard it is to be a big leaguer. Does this person fit in another place? Because there is way more opportunity for them to impact within this position. And that can be in the business world as well. They might not end up being in this role with this title, but boy, they are super impactful in this role because they have this skill set.
Nice.
Good.
All right, I have one more. This is from a different Michael.
Okay.
This one is soft skills and qualities can be critical, yet the most difficult to
Mm.
measure and compare. How do you measure and compare soft skills at scale? How do you measure things like humility, grit, or hunger?
That's a
Yeah,
tough.
tremendous question, and one I spent a lot of time on my hike yesterday thinking about because I think that is super important for one during that process of watching and evaluating is they understand how important those skills are to you within your organization. And so as you're walking through maybe time watching them compete as a player or you're interviewing them, that you ask them about times where they've been in difficult situations and players especially, hey, tell me about a time where there was some failure or it was just a really tough time. And boy, the surprised answers that I've had over the years, well, I got a B plus one time in this one class and man, I was so disappointed. Okay, like it fits in context compared to, well, when I was a sophomore, my dad passed away and then we had to go move in with my aunt and uncle and my mom was working two jobs and she did all of these things so I could then accomplish and get to here. Huh. Okay, where you balance that. So trying to get to situations they've been in, trying to understand the influences and the influencers that they've learned from, I think is another thing that I try and put into that rubrics that we will use during an interview hire and putting it on scale. It might be something that I view in a certain way compared to during that interview process back to those stakeholders, and they have met with many other people that see the game, evaluate the person or the interview process differently, then they put their grade. And so then we will come back together and try and connect those and see that over a course of time that has played out into a really impactful role, whether it was on the field or certainly off the field.
Great, TA. Thank you so much, man. Well, you just brought up something that I think is really important before we ask you the final question around, hey, tell me a time you failed, and one might mention a B plus, and other, obviously a lot more challenging circumstances, and this is something I learned from you. I don't know if you know this. I don't know if you remember saying this, but this is something specifically I remember you saying that I learned from you 7 years ago now. I think 6, 7 years ago. You said the greatest predictor of future behavior is past behavior.
Mm.
And so we wanted, because I remember us having the conversation on like, how do we get better assessing out talent? And it's so difficult because you're thinking about this is a high school player and can they compete on a professional diamond where people are getting paid to perform, day in and day out. And this person's 35 and you're 21. It's just so challenging. But I just remember you talking about really the greatest predictor of how they're going to do in the future is how they've behaved in the past. And like, let's not look past that. And so I think it is important to go, hey, what if you're going to bring someone into a really challenging environment where there's going to be a lot of failure? I've got to know how you've handled challenges and failure before, because that's just going to, I think it goes back to that point you brought up before, where it's like, it's part of doing it right. It's like, this is a part of the process. And so thank you for highlighting that. Final question. We ask every guest this, right? We're now over 50 guests into this thing, and we've had some incredible answers. It's always fun to hear based on no-show dogs, right? We talk about this. What does it mean to be a no-show dog? The opposite of that, or that is a hunting dog, right? It's like we're willing to roll up our sleeves, get after it, do the work, get in the arena, do whatever it takes to be successful, right? And you've had a lot of success in your career up to this point. And so when you reflect on it and you think back, what do you think were some of the things that you were willing to do that others weren't, that has helped you have the success you've had so far in your career?
Outstanding in the world of trying to figure out, yourself through self-auditing. And when we talked about this question, I thought about the things that did become super, super important. And that was taking the mindset of a player and being very disciplined in the way I prepare my body, the way I prepare my travel, the way I prepare going to the yard. In other words, and what mindset will I be? And then what are my routines? And my routines take me through a certain point of evaluating. And then most importantly, we all, in all of our businesses, have our embrace the suck moment. So is that TSA has asked you to go back out for the third time, and that's going to be put a damper on getting to the flight, or it's sitting in front of the computer and typing those reports up and getting them sent away, or it's filling out different reviews. So in other words, be diligent, be disciplined with those routines, I think has something that has really been beneficial to me. I think the other thing, and again, I've listened to so many of the great people you've had on this show, and they talk so much about that lifetime learner, to be able to evolve and embrace the environment that is going around us. The other thing that has become so important, especially now as I have got to a certain age, is not only continue to embrace new technology, to embrace all of the analytics and the changing landscape, but be able to apply that. And that's a big difference. You can be this incredible learner. I listen to all these podcasts. I read all of these books. Do I reflect on what I've learned and then apply that? And that was something I've always now started to do, and challenging people is, I know until 50, I had boxes of those. I had my journals, and I would get the look from my wife that would say, okay, you want to go tackle that subject? Where's that? Uh-oh. So I put it onto a different cloud base and started taking more ownership of putting that down so that I can reflect on it and reference it, so that you can then use it and apply it. Because I've been exposed to all those great people that have talked about leadership or hitting or base running or pitching, and where does that information go? So I think that's been one of the things that's allowed me to evolve as an evaluator, to then be able to give and understand and ask questions of these new technologies that allow me to be better informed and then still be tremendously impactful with my information that I'm giving.
TA, you're the man, buddy. Hey, I know people are going to want to connect with you or reach out or whatever it might be. Is there a place where people can go to find you?
Yes, thank you. I am on LinkedIn, Tom Allison. Please do reach out, especially those that maybe I didn't get to your questions from your people there, I'd love to be able to follow up and give, more of my information, and certainly hope that some of it can be fruitful in their own journey, in their own growth as an evaluator of talent in their home life, or certainly in their professional life as well.
Thank you for that. That's great.
Yeah, I love it. TA, thank you so much for joining us today on the No Show Dogs podcast. And for our listeners, again, thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate you as always. And we'd love to hear feedback on the new segment we're doing, the questions from the arena. I think it's a fun new ad. And so as we always sign off here, go out and make it a great today. Appreciate you, TA.
You bet. Thanks, guys.